We ended with the question, why am I here? I want to share something with you that expands on what you guys talked about. We had a few really cool, here's why I feel like I'm here. I want to add something that I think incorporates all of the things that you guys said. This was taught to me once, and this, as much as anything else, had an enormous impact on how I look at fear in a really cool way. You hear people say, just get on with your, if you're afraid of something, just go through it. But if you have a deeper understanding of why you might have those fears, it's motivational. At least this was very motivational for me. So when I say the term comfort zone, what comes to your mind? A comfort zone. What's a comfort zone? Give me an example of an area where you'd feel most comfortable. Yeah.
So, like with social anxiety, my comfort zone.
So what is at the place with your friends, or what is not at the place at your friends that is at the place where you don't know anybody as you perceive it?
What I know.
Okay, and what might be, so the unknown, okay. So think about this. This is our comfort zones. We have this circle. Let's pretend that this circle is you, all right? And one of the first, I don't know if it's a law of behavior, but the first principle that we want to play with is we tend, and let's play with what you just said as an accurate statement. We tend to gravitate toward our comfort zones. We tend to gravitate toward our comfort zones. Now, using your example of your friend's party or somebody's party who you don't know anyone, what's different? She's going to more likely go to the place that is what versus what's more likely there that will make it so you gravitate toward that?
I'll probably go to a place where I know people.
Okay, so there's nothing unknown there. You probably know what the party will be like. You'll probably know, right? And we can probably we can fit that into most everything. How many of you, just out of curiosity, are sitting in the same seat or pretty close to the same seat you sat in on the first day of class in here? Most of us, right? And there's no judgment about that. It's not make you wrong or bad. That's just, and how many of you tend to sit in that place in most of your classes? Pretty close. Now, it's not bad or good. It's just we tend to gravitate towards those. How many of you tend to eat the same kinds of foods if you have a choice? Yeah, I'm going to go with this rather than something I'm not familiar with. How many of you have the same friends? And when you move to somewhere, find that you have the same kinds of friends when you move to the new place. We buy the same cars. We have the same, once we're good at a sport, that's kind of the sport that we play for the rest of our lives. We tend to gravitate toward those things. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so that's the first principle, is we tend to gravitate toward our comfort zones. Now, the second principle is we as human beings are designed to grow. We're designed to become more of who we are. So pretending that this circle is you, we are designed to become bigger, to expand in whatever it is we do, or in whatever kind of a person we are. Now, here's the rub. Here's the tricky part of this. In order for us to grow, we have to go from our comfort zones into this area we'll call discomfort zone. That says zone, Z-O-N-E. Sorry, I'm a horrible writer. In order for us to grow, we have to move from our comfort zone into our discomfort zone. Somebody give me an example where that has been the case for you. And we can think of thousands and thousands of examples.
Going to school, for one, that was a big thing for me.
At the age you're at now,
Yeah.
or kindergarten?
No, the age that I'm at now, because I hadn't gone to school for so long, I was used to just being at home with my kids, and then I had to leave part of that at least, and start going to school, and it was definitely a big step.
So it pushed you out here.
Yeah.
As you have been in school, do you find yourself more or able to do more or more of a just a human being than you were before that?
Oh yeah, it's expanded my confidence in myself, and my knowledge and my abilities. I feel like I could do almost anything I really wanted to do.
Good. Perfect example. And every one of us has done this a lot. We've gone from here to here. First day of kindergarten, if we want to go back that far. Scariest day of my life up until kindergarten. I cried for half the day because I didn't want to be, we didn't have preschool back then. That wasn't a thing. So it was the first day of not being at home, and it was like huge. But after a few days of, okay, that became my new comfort zone. But I grew, and we all do this all the time. Now, the rub with this, the tricky part of this is going from here to here almost always, not always, but almost always involves overcoming fear. There's always, not always, but most of the time, there's going to be some sense of fear. How would you, we kind of went over this last time, but how would you define fear? What is the fear? What is it when we fear something? What is the thought that precedes that emotion of fear? What did we decide last time? Yeah. The very thing that we just said is what you just said. As each time you do something that is from here to here, you're going to grow. What is the thought that precedes the emotion when you're looking into that unknown or you're looking into that scary? What is the thought that we're having? There's going to be pain. This is going to hurt somehow. And fear is the thought of avoiding that pain. Yes? You with me? Stay with me. This is good stuff. Fear is the desire to avoid that pain, and so we stay where we are. This was mine when I was growing up, when I was in like high school. I'd want to ask out the 10. You know what I mean by the 10, and I'm the 3. And so I knew for sure she was going to say, "Get lost, jerk." And so what did I do? When I'm getting ready to call her up, she's the 10, I'm the 3, and I know she's going to say, "Get lost, jerk." What do I do when I'm getting ready to call her up? Am I the only one?
No, you don't call.
I don't call at all,
Yeah.
right?
Or you get the phone ringing and hang up.
Yeah. Fear is the feeling of wanting to avoid that her saying, "Get lost, jerk," because I would interpret that as being painful, emotionally painful. Yes? And that's how it is in most things. I'm not going to try that because there might be pain. I'm not going to try that because it might hurt. But, like you accurately said, this is where we really grow. This is where growth happens. So, if that's the case, yeah, go ahead. Listen.
Do you think that our comfort zone can shrink? Because I felt like there was a time in my life where I was doing lots of things that were outside my comfort zone. I was growing a lot, but I've stopped doing those things, and I feel like my comfort zone shrank.
I would guess that a person, and I'm just making this as a blanket guess. I don't know for sure, but I would say people who are depressed, it may not look like fear to them, but they don't want to go anywhere that might feel the least bit uncomfortable. Yeah. So I would say for sure it would. Yeah. It's very dynamic, this. I look at people like, and whatever you think of the guy, I don't care what you think of him, but I think of, who's the president? Trump. That guy's comfort zone must be so gigantic. He does stuff nobody else on the planet will do in front of tens of thousands of people. Right? And I think that's partly because he just keeps, like exactly what you said, Jen, he just keeps going this way all day long. Oh, I'm not afraid. I'll go meet with that guy. I'll go meet with this corporate head. I'll go meet with... And all day long, he's pushing out there to the point where nothing is fearful for him because everything's... I don't even know if he has a discomfort zone. I don't care what you think about him politically or whatever, but he's an amazing example of how... Mitt Romney was another one who half the people, think about it, if half the people on the planet hate your guts, which is pretty much the case with Trump, half the people on the planet, more than half, think he's the most delusional idiot on the planet, and he just keeps right on going. He doesn't care.
Can't that also come from narcissism? Like your comfort zone expands so much, you just get, so confident in yourself, so you could do anything.
You could maybe go there, yeah. But whatever it is, he doesn't sense that he's afraid of stuff. Mitt Romney didn't sense that he was afraid of stuff, and he just kept doing that over and over and over. If you want to add the narcissist, I don't know. I don't have a good idea of that. I'm not a psychologist or a psychotherapist to analyze somebody, but I watch what these guys do. And that's not limited to just those guys. When we see, you said that you talk to people who are successful. This is what they do. So the next question that we should ask ourselves is, how do I make it so that, what can I think about so that this jump from here to here is easier? Because for some of us, man, I don't want to do it. I'm scared to death of most everything. So I want to go through some things that I have learned that if you have these things in mind, this isn't so tough. This is a lot easier. And there's a few principles that if we keep in mind, then that's the case. If I were to ask you, take 2 buckets, or to take as many buckets as you need, but if I were to ask you, go around the world and find all the fear that you could find. Like instead of rocks, I want you to find fear. And I want you to fill these buckets with fear. How full would these buckets be?
I feel like they would be overflowing.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Where would I find? I said, if there were, instead of rocks, which I could put in, where's the fear that I could put in them? Where is that?
It's inside the bucket.
How would I put that in a bucket? The point that I'm trying to make here, that sounds kind of strange, but fear is not, the first principle that we have to understand is things out there aren't inherently fearful. Just like, remember we said no event is inherently stressful? I don't think events are also inherently fearful. We asked we mentioned last time or earlier, we said the number one social fear in the country is what? Public speaking, right? Is there anything inherently fearful in public speaking? No. It's just a series of actions that a person takes. There's nothing that universally causes everyone to have fear who does it. And I can't think of anything that does. Can you? That whoever experiences it is going to be afraid of it. Or whoever's thinking about it is going to be afraid of it.
I mentioned this to a couple of girls before class. I saw a cartoon one time of people standing in line waiting for their turn at the guillotine. And one guy turns to the other and says, you know, they say public speaking causes more fear than anything. But he says, this has got to fit in there somewhere.
This is worse. What is it about the guillotine that might be fearful? I would say, death, we could easily go to death and say, is that inherently fearful? I know plenty of people, my grandpa was one, who he had the belief that life continues, and he also had his wife had died some years before. He was in his mid-90s, and he had the belief, whether it was true or not, I don't know for sure, but he had the belief that when he passed on, he didn't believe that death ended life, that when he passed on, that he was going to get to be with his wife again. Now, I don't know for sure if that's true or not, but that belief made it so that the pain of death wasn't a thing to be afraid of for him. He had no fear of death. He actually he was kind of ticked off every day that he woke up and he was still alive. Because he was just kind of existing and his health was getting worse and worse. It wasn't a fun ride. The fun of the ride had finished. In the guillotine example, I can see the pain that would last about that long, I would be afraid of. But I would go, then it's over. I can understand that part. If there's a real pain. But most of the things that we experience, day-to-day life, there's not a real pain. So the first principle, there's nothing, or I should say few things, is inherently fearful. Now, how does that make our fear of things change just a little bit? Let me do this. The second fear is fears are learned. Those are E's. Fears are learned. So nothing's inherently fearful, and fears are learned. Think of something that you find that is a fear for you. That you think, oh man, I'm really afraid to do that thing. When you think of these two principles, what does that do to your fear a little bit?
So I have one example. I've done theater a lot throughout my life, and auditions are really hard because you get up there, you perform in front of the people who are putting on the show, and they're judging you to see if you fit for the show. And every time I'd go into an audition, I was like, oh crap, they're judging me. This is going to be so bad. And then I did a lot of workshops with directors, and they were like, we're not there to get after you. We want you to succeed. We're sitting there cheering for you. And once I started realizing that, I'm like, okay, wait, they're not a scary thing. They're like actually like cheering you on, and it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't as scary doing auditions after that.
See, what I hear you saying is you realize some wiggle room, you realize you could think about it differently. See, a lot of people say, I'm scared to death of spiders, for example. Or I'm scared to death of snakes. Or I'm scared to death of heights. Or I'm scared to death of, and you feel, and they think they're attached to that fear. That there's no possible getting out of that fear. I'm scared to death to ask a guy out. Or I'm scared to death to interview for this job or audition. But if we recognize, first of all, that it's not the thing that we're doing, it's not the audition that's causing you to have fear, it's how you're thinking about it, which what I heard you say is, I stopped thinking that was causing me fear, and I chose to realize I could think about it in a different way. Yes? Now, going along with that, if your fears are learned, by definition, what can you do with that? If a fear is learned.
I think you do the thing you're afraid of. So you can
Okay,
show
so-
yourself that you can do it.
So you've gotten to the solution. Go back to this for a second. If a fear is learned,
Then you can unlearn it.
it's unlearnable, not unlearnable. You can unlearn a thing. You're not stuck to it, right? I work with so many people who say, well, I just can't go anywhere near spiders. Like it's a genetic thing. You know, my parents were afraid of spiders, and their parents were afraid of spiders, so I must be afraid of spiders.
I work with kids, and their favorite thing when we go outside is to look for bugs or spiders, and if like a bee's flying around their face, they're just like, oh, and I'm like freaking out inside, but I don't want to like teach them to freak out, but like they haven't learned yet
Yeah.
to be afraid of those things, and it's kind of cool to see, I guess.
It is cool to see, and it reminds us, wait a second,
Yeah.
if this 5-year-old, I don't know what age group,
Usually
3-year-old,
four,
if
yeah.
this 3-year-old's not, why should I be? But at some point, we've decided whatever fears that we have we're stuck to them. But the psychologists tell us there are really only 2 fears that are with us when we're born, that are kind of, I don't know, inherited isn't the right word, but they're part of our DNA. Do any of you know what those 2 fears are? Think of a newborn, an infant. What would an infant naturally be afraid of, do you think?
Not being nurtured or loved.
Yeah, they don't have that sense yet. That's a little bit down the road where they develop that. But I mean right out of the womb.
Falling.
Falling? Falling is one.
Or
Where
hungry.
they're just right out of the womb. You can see it when when you kind of go like this, the child goes, right? And the other one is loud noises. There's something about those 2 things that psychologists say those 2 might be part of our DNA. All the other fears that we have, at some point we've learned them. How did we learn them? 2 places. Where did we learn them from? What would you say? How would you finish? How do these kids who aren't afraid of them, the bees and the bugs, at what point or what was it where it became a learned fear?
Well, as soon as one of them gets stung by a bee, they probably afraid of it. And maybe the experience of others, like their parents and how they react.
Right. If your mom goes, ah, to a spider, it's more likely you'll go, oh, that must mean that spiders, and she does this. Okay, I got it. That's how I'm supposed to act. It's learned. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that or anything wrong with you. But what we have to do is start to realize I'm not stuck to that fear, whatever it is. Because the thing that I know, the thing that I see over and over again is we say we want something. Imagine this for a second. Let's say that Amy's my goal. Okay? Be a good goal to have. Knowing what a wonderful person you are. Whatever that goal is, because fear has to do with down the road. But what happens, what we do is we go, oh no, but what about, and we throw in some unknown. That includes some sense of there might be pain. And so what we do is we put a big wall between us and the thing we want. And we get the wall. Instead of getting Amy, we get the wall. Oops, sorry. Do you get that? We don't get what we want. We get something we'll call, oh, I was just too afraid. Now, it seems to me we'd be better off getting what we want. The third principle there's no pain, usually, in our comfort zone. In other words, out here, in this area here, so here's our safe place. When we do these things, we recognize, now when I say pain, I mean physical pain. We can make up emotional pain. We're masters at that. Oh, she looked at me weird. Oh, I'm worthless. Oh, geez. Right? We make that up. But there's no physical pain out here. How do we know this? How can we prove this? How can we prove number 3? Give me some examples. You went to school. You were afraid to go to school, but you went, and you jumped in, and you notice that you keep not having physical pain. You don't get a lot of sleep sometimes, but you're not getting, nobody's going to your head, right? And that's the way it is for us all the time. We step out there into that scary place, and we go, well, wait a second, I'm okay. And that's how it always is. And if we keep in mind when we're going for stuff that that's how it always is, that we're going to be fine, that we're going to be okay, that we're not going to get hurt, then we just start going for stuff. Let me ask you this, Jen, right? When you talk to those guys and they say they kept going out of their comfort zones, if you were to ask them, or they kept growing. Is that what you said? You said they kept growing, right? If you were to ask them, well, what motivated you, or how did you just keep going in the presence of your fears? How would they probably respond to that? So rather than it being a wall, it becomes a cue to action that you look forward to, right? Realizing, see, that's the most beautiful thing. Realizing that when you do it, this is what you get. And each time you do it, that's what you get. And pretty soon, I remember the first time I ever taught a college course. I was at BYU, and I was teaching kind of the equivalent of our healthy lifestyles class. And I'll never forget this. Scared to death. And I'd been in front of groups of people before, but I never thought I would be a teacher. And first day, and this I'll never forget this room we were in. It was like 130 students just went that way. It went up. and I could barely see the people in the back. It was dark. And I got up in front of this group of people, and I was just like this. I lost like 5 pounds because I was so nervous. I was just nervous as can be. I seriously was just sweating like crazy. And I got through with it, and one person came up to me and said, "Oh, that was an interesting class." And I thought it was just the worst hour a person could possibly spend with me. It was just horrible. And one person said, "That was an interesting class." And I thought, oh, should I try that again? And they were paying me to do it, so I said, okay, I'll do it again. And each time I did it, because I was like the tiniest of tiny holes, like you were saying, as far as teaching is concerned. And each time I did it, to the point now where, and I'm not trying to say that I know thousands of people who are better teachers than me. But when I come to class, when I walk to class, or when I'm thinking about what I'm doing, the idea of fear never occurs to me anymore. It's just, okay, this is what'll happen. And if somebody doesn't like me, doesn't like what I do, I don't care. Because I've done it so many times, and that fear kept making me, okay, I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep doing it because I want to get good at this. And we can do that with everything we do. And little bit at a time, you grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. And now your comfort zone in that thing is probably gigantic. You might have other small comfort zones in other things, but each time you do something in that thing, like calling up, I decided I'm just going to call up the 10. And I did, and she did say, "Get lost, jerk," some of the equivalent. And I went, oh, jeez. But I thought, man, I still want to date girls. So then and finally I got the 10, and then I get to live with her forever. I mean, at least as far as I know. Because I thought, I'm not going to let this fear get in the way of me experiencing life with a 10.
So what we've been talking about really reminds me of a quote my mom sent me when I was going through a really stressful time. And it says there's 2 ways to look at fear. Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. The choice is yours. And it broke it into the acronym, or FEAR.
FEAR, forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. Yeah, same thing, exactly, right? So beautiful. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, if you follow baseball at all, what's the batting average of the best player in the game right now? Guys, do you know? What's the batting average? How many times does the best hitter in baseball, how many times out of 10 does the batter get out? 7, right? 7 out of 10 times the batter fails. And he's the best in the major leagues. This is my favorite quote from Richard Bach. I have this right by my desk, and whenever I notice myself wimping out and getting afraid of something, going small, I look at this. Richard Bach, who wrote tons of great books, he wrote, Jonathan Livingston Seagull was his first main one. He said, lean into your fears, dare them to do their worst. And I think this is exactly what you said, only in his words. Dare them to do their worst and cut them down when they try. If you don't, they'll mushroom till they surround you. Choke the road to the life you want. And I love this. Every turn you fear is empty air dressed to look like jagged hell.